This is Off the 11th Hour, and I'm your host, Nathaniel Stone, but we all know who the Lord of Hosts is. Say it with me in any dialect you so choose. Yahuwah, Tsabaoth. Kodesh brothers and sisters, fellow members in the body of Messiah, and those in the world, thank you for giving me your attention in a world full of distractions. This is Season 2, Episode 17. Wow, really moving on. I'm recording all these in succession. It's a lot. I got a lot going on, but I really feel it's very important. It is pressed upon my heart to get this information out, especially with the state of the world, the state of affairs, where things are at. I don't know when I will be able to do a video like this again, so or I'll have time to make videos again. So keep me in your prayers that the will of Yahuwah is done, and hopefully that is me able to get this information out. He exists outside of linear time, so even though this is already recorded, if you give it a little prayer, help me get some strength here. I really trying to finish this race, to run this race to completion. You can pray for me in the future as you're watching this, to help me in the present now, because Yahuwah hears your prayers then. He knows what you're going to pray then, and he can help me now as I pray for all of those who are undergoing trials and tribulations in this world. So let's get into the material. I have a lot to cover, and I really want to get forward in this information. Very important information to get forward on, but I really feel that it's important to get into the Babylon the Great teaching. I shared Babylon the Great teaching and Mark of the Beast teaching. And someone had said, like, Nathaniel Stone, I like your stuff. I like the things that you have to share, but it's always so dark. It's always so gloomy, so to speak. The things that you're sharing is of warnings. I'm like, well, yeah, we're in the end days. What do you expect? Roses. But I didn't say it like that way. But I'm making a little bit of a joke on it. But I prayed on that matter, and I asked for the Father for some help, for some gleaming portions of light, and I was given the 144,000 teaching along with, oh my goodness, the two witnesses teaching. How amazing is that? Can't wait to come forward with that information. Hopefully I'm able to get forward in it before I have to leave. Time is shrinking, and I have a lot to cover in a short period in time. Gotta do this back to back. Look, wearing the same shirt still. We're just moments after the last video closed, so gotta keep moving forward. So let's get into essentially what we covered in part 1 and part 2. Essentially, we covered what is SoS, Revelation 2:9-3:9. Those who are of the Synagogue of Satan, who say they are Yahudim. Look at that word in English, what the word Yahudim is. Starts with the letter J. In your standard English scripture version, Yahudim or Yahudi. But as we covered in episode 1 and episode 2, that the word Yahudi is kind of similar to the word Yasharal in a lot of ways. It's determined on context. Israel is determined on context. Yahudim is by definition through context. So we want to really make sure to understand what the context is, to be able to properly analyze it. But then I shared Yasha, deliverances of the Yahudim, in John chapter 4:22 talks about this, and it's basically everything's pointing to Messiah. And, we want to be able to understand that the bloodlines exist. They existed for a reason. They had to be there to basically harness and hold down these covenants, trusted individuals through a trusted kingdom that's made plenty of mistakes, but has ultimately fought that good fight so that we can be here today to have these things preserved for us. However, those of the flesh, those who are not of promise, they do not have those of the flesh. They are walking in stubbornness. They are walking in rebellion, And if they rejected Messiah, then therefore they are under the curses that were written in the law of Moses. And unless you have the Messiah to overcome these punishments, those who rejected Messiah, the bloodline who've rejected Messiah, not just those of the believers or those of the 12 tribe kingdom that are under that, but also those of the nations who rejected Messiah are under some serious punishments, as we're seeing as this world is developing today. But I covered, namely in episode 1, basically the false spirit of Judaism, and we'll get more into that here later on. But now we're also going to be getting into maybe some bloodline stuff too. I really focused on some spiritual religious powers and principalities in episode 1, and we focused a lot on the spiritualized sense of the word Yahudi or Yasharal, Israel, in episode 2. But now we're going to be getting into more, I guess you could say, kind of wrapping all the points up together. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the first main point. Let's go to the beach. And we have here in Isaiah chapter 14:1. Because Yahuwah has compassion on Yaqub, that's bloodline, right? And shall again choose Yasharal, that would be bloodline and spiritual, but namely that would be spiritual, and give them rest in their own land. Excuse me. And the stranger shall join them, and they shall cling to the house of Yaqub. That's a 12 tribe kingdom. And people shall take them and bring them to their own place, and the house of Yasharal shall possess them for servants and female servants in the land of Yahuwah, and they shall make captives of their captors and rule over their oppressors. Now, I know a lot of people like to talk about this being that the bloodline is going to take all those that aren't of that bloodline and basically take captors of the of those, make captives of the captors and rule over them. But might not be quite as much as we know, as we start doing study, things sometimes are a little bit deeper than what we see on the surface. But I want to share something here. This is a prophecy to Babel. So whenever you see the word Babel in the Old Testament, shadow type and picture, Babel the Great. You need to understand that. Put that in your mind. You see the word Babel, instantly understand Babel the Great, shadow type and picture on some way, shape, or form in, Revelation 17 and 18. I think it's at the end of 16. I know it's at the end of 16 also. So at the end of 16, 17, and 18. And that's essentially, what it's talking about in that sense. And what is Babylon the Great? Well, we'll get into that into the teaching. I can't wait to share it. But here he's talking about the king of Babel. Now this is talking about old Babylon, but in context of talking about Babel the Great, I think there's something really interesting I want to share here. Talking about being brought down to Sheol, O Hillel, son of the morning, right? That's where they get the name Lucifer that they translate there. And what I really want to share here is rise up against them, cut off from Babel the name and the remnant, and offspring and descendant. Now, Babel will be confusion, great scattering in the end days, in a spiritual sense as well as in a physical sense. And we'll get more into that later on. Might not be getting into this prophecy directly, but it says here that she kills her own people. Right here, I passed it up. You are not joined with them in the burial place, for you have destroyed your land or polluted your land and killed your people. Do we see Babylon the Great today killing her own people with, and all sorts of other pharmakia practices and poisoning the land and poisoning the people with unclean food, drink, water, air, what have you? We see these soft kill tactics that are happening, and so what has been is what will be. There is nothing new under the sun. But here we have compassion on Yaqub, and shall again choose Yasharal, those who overcome this world with Elohim, and strangers shall join them and cling to the house of Yaqub. They take them into their own place, and they shall be as female servants, male servants, female servants, or slaves, if you will, in the land of Yahuwah. But remember, these are the people that are of Yasharal, the people that are of this chosen that are chosen, whether from the fleshly line or from those that are grafted in, they're dealing in righteousness. How often do I see people use these verses in unrighteousness? How often do I see these people, I would love to be a slave of Yahuwah than be a king of Hasatan, of Satan. I would be treated better as a slave of Yahuwah than I would as a king in Satan's kingdom. It would be better to be a slave or a servant, because Yahuwah is righteous and he has compassion, even so much so that, in Proverbs 12:10, it says that the righteous shows compassion on his animals. So that means that even to the animals, to show compassion, this loving commitment, this compassion to the animals, that is what righteousness, if he shows righteousness and he brings salvation to animals, Psalms 36:6, that he's salvation, man and animal. If he is going to do this for man and even animals, even the little sparrows, maybe even a little ant gets brought in for even for snakes, for adders, for cobras. The child plays with a cobra on a set apart mountain. For animals to come in and to show compassion, do you really think that this verse is talking about your typical, slavery scene that they see as you see in like Roots or other versions? On a side note, I want you to understand this. Do you know, side note here, do you know that more whites or Europeans were sold into slavery in the same period in time than all of the African Americans that were brought into the 13 colonies? Only about 400,000 African Americans or Africans, so-called Africans from the west coast of Africa, only about 400,000 were brought to the 13 colonies out of 10 to 12 million. The majority of them went to Central and South America, and they were treated extremely harshly. But the 13 colonies, which grew into the United States of America, the United States Navy was originally founded to combat slavery. Did you know that? And it was to combat what is known as the white slave trade. More whites were sold into slavery, about 1.1 to 1.2 million during the same period in time. In fact, after the 1863 Emancipation Proclamation, whites were still getting picked up on the coastlines of Ireland, Spain, Britain, Malta, Greece, Italy, and sold into North Africa, into the Ottoman Empire, actually sold into Africa. So when you see in the Blessings and Curses chapter of Deuteronomy 28, as I've done research and study, a lot of this history is a little bit hidden. And at the very end of Deuteronomy 28, I think it's 28:68, it says that you'll be sold into Egypt for no one to buy or sell. Well, technically, this white slave trade was sold into the Ottoman Empire in Egypt, and that scripture, you could say, was brought to a fullness of that understanding. However, does I say that is only does that only mean that the white slave trade, does that discount the black slave trade? No. At the same point in time, whites were getting picked up on the coastline by pirate slavers in Europe and sold to North Africa, and then they were basically trading hands. And the African slave trade was then taking Africans from even the same docks in many areas and then bringing them into the Americas. And so slavery was happening. Slavery is a world. Even the word slave itself comes from the Slavic people, which is after white people oppressing white people, the Slavs were oppressed and then hunted and killed and oppressed. If you look at the history of the Slavs after the Romanov dynasty going into the Bolshevik Revolution, into communism, you can literally find and follow the blessings and curses, namely the curses of Deuteronomy 28. But this is people everywhere. We'll get more into those blessings and curses. I just wanted to share that understanding, not to discount the word slavery, but I wanted to anyone who's experienced this, but really, in the physical sense, no one today is dealing with what they were dealing with 150 years ago. It's shadow types and pictures. It's a lot of it is fabricated for the purpose of dividing the nation against one another, to make this racial division, which is part of the Matthew 24:7-8 prophecy of nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom, which is actually ethnos against ethnos and basilia against basilia in Greek, which is race against race or ethnicity against ethnicity. Satan is stirring the pot. We can't feed into this stuff, but it is important, to have history and not have history wiped out or improperly skewed. And we see that what we see in media, in history, in these governmental so-called educational misinformation systems are trying to make one group of people hit another group of people, and they're trying to cause racial and class divisions just for the purpose of restructuring and bringing order out of chaos. We got to rise above this. All nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues come out and come into that one nation. So when I see Isaiah 14:2, and I see a lot of unrighteous people of many bloodlines, unrighteous white people saying that they're Yahudim, and they're using this and glorifying themselves about how they're going to have 2,800 slaves each, or you see those of darker skin color, and they're making people kiss their boots that are, and bow down to their bloodline, and this is not righteousness, guys. It's not righteousness, again. So when I see Isaiah 14:2, and it says here, people shall bring them and take to their own place, the house of Yasharal, and possess them for servants. Well, no one unrighteous, only those of the character of Yahuwah are brought into New Jerusalem, namely spoken of in Revelation 22:4 and 5. They have the Father's name, character, and authority on their forehead. So anyone who has the Father's name, character, and authority on their forehead, they're not going to be mistreating their brother, even if they're in a servant or if you want to even use the word slave, in a slave position. There's no way. I would rather be under someone righteous and be their slave, to do their very bidding, than to be a so-called free man under Satan's wicked system, under these oppressors, under these charlatans that are there today. So just understand here, when you see this terminology of Isaiah 14:2, okay, so yes, so I want you to have that in mind. But yes, it does say that he shall choose Yasharal. This can be spiritual and also bloodline. I would say it is spiritual here and it is bloodline here, and I would say both here, that he shall again choose Yasharal and give them rest in their land, and the Ger shall join them, and they shall cling to the house of Yaquab. Now, I see this here. By the way, a side note, I didn't have this in my notes. What's really interesting in the Daniel chapter 7 prophecy, let's just go there real quick, right? What's really interesting in the Daniel chapter 7 prophecy, it's really good that you see this. I don't have time to get into this in detail, but not in this season. But in Daniel 7 here, talking about the three beasts, right? This is the bear, feet of the bear. Here's the leopard, body of the leopard. Here's the lion, the mouth of the lion. This is all pieces of the first beast out of the sea in Revelation 13. And I can show you that the beast in Revelation 13 is this fourth beast. Because why? Because it devours and crushes and tramples the rest of the beast with its feet. That's why it amalgamates. This is Rome here, but I want you to see this, that in Daniel, this Ancient of Days sits. This is Revelation chapter 4 information. And then comes this Son of Man, the Son of Enosh, or the coming with the clouds on the heavens, the Son of Man, comes to the Ancient of Days. This is this is Revelation chapter 5. This Lamb that was slain comes to the Ancient of Days sitting in the throne. Read Revelation 4 and 5. They're both in the Spirit. People try to say that the Father and the Son are both the same when they're in the Spirit. Well, here they're two representations, and one takes the scroll from the other's hand. And I do believe that this is an actual, people try to hyper spiritualize. Well, have you ever seen a spirit? Have you ever seen an angel of spirit flesh? I call it spirit flesh. Have you ever seen glowing spirit flesh? I have, on more than one occasion. This is something that is not made of this world, similar to what Balaam saw, or other people see, an angel like in Daniel chapter 10 or Daniel chapter 8, or in other places throughout the scriptures. Revelations chapter 1, we see this in Revelation chapter 10. We see this information all throughout, and people try to hyper spiritualize this as only just a vision. No, this spirit flesh takes up matter. It is made not of this world. It is glowing. We reflect light. This stuff is made of light. If anyone has seen something, not just in vision form, but also in while they were in their body, not taken out of the body, to see a vision. I've seen it on both accounts, and I want you to understand that I believe that this throne room scene that you see in Revelation 4 and 5, yes, it is spiritual. Yes, it has spiritual implications, but I do believe that is actually something that is existing in time, space, and matter. And so to try to say that when the Son is in heaven, he is then the Father in spirit, that doesn't hold water, because these people haven't had experiences in that supernatural way, and that's okay. I'll agree to disagree on that information, but still, here you have the Son of Man. This will be the Lamb that was slain, coming to the Ancient of Days, sitting on the throne, as Revelation 4 and 5 talk about. Now here you have that this everlasting rule was given. Now I find here, where is it? In 9, I think? No, here, 11. The sound of those great words, this is part of that beast, that fourth beast, looking as the beast was killed and his body destroyed and given to the burning fire. Now that's in Revelation 19:20, where the beast and the false prophet, which is the Revelation 13, sea beast and earth beast respectively, that they are thrown alive into Gehenna, burning with fire. So we have here a link between Daniel 7:11 and Revelation 19:20 is connected there. So then what happens after that beast? Those with the mark of the beast are then thrown into Gehenna. Here it says, in the rest of the beasts, who are the rest of the beasts? Well, you have Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece, the lion, the bear, and the leopard, respectively. And it says that their rule was taken away. Why was their rule taken away? Because Messiah's kingdom, the 1,000-year reign, comes into power. But a lengthening of life was given to them. Given to who? To these beasts. Who are the beasts? The nations. Well, what does the one nation rule over? Well, they rule over the earth. And who is on the earth? We still see sin on the world during the 1,000-year reign. Sin sacrifices are being performed. We see those that are having children and living and dying. But then we also see other scriptures pointing to people giving an incorruptible, immortal body, 1 Corinthians 15:50 through 53, and that these are part of the first resurrection, and the second death possesses no authority over these. This is Revelation chapter 20, verse 4 and 6. So we see kind of like two opposite things here, and you're like, how can it be this and how can it be that? And people don't understand. Well, I think the key is given here in Daniel 7:12, but a lengthening of life was given to them. To who? To the nations, those that are still of flesh and blood, but are not given that everlasting body. Those are the first resurrection. Those that lived through this system, but weren't part. But it says for a season and for a time. Well, they're giving a length and a life. Well, what is the season? Well, the season would be what? The 1,000-year reign. And the time would be the time that Satan is released of the gathering of Gog and Magog from what? Revelation 20, verse 7 through 10, and then are finally destroyed. So a season and a time. So this is what I think, the code word is on that. The secret is on that. I think that's some of the answers. If I'm wrong, forgive me again. Oh, right. I forgot to get into this. I want you guys to understand that this information that I'm going over here, it can be a little bit touchy, especially this third episode. So if you disagree with me, send me an email. Put a comment in the comments on the YouTube. If you disagree, we can respectfully disagree. You might not like what I'm saying. Please share with me why I'm wrong. Don't just beat me over the head. Help correct me. Sharpen me up. Show me why I'm incorrect. But at least listen to what I have to say. And don't I've said some things verbatim in some previous videos, and I've had a couple people make some comments that just shows that they didn't even listen or watch it. And if you say that, I'm not going to be rude to you at all by any means, but it will at least show me that you really didn't listen to what I had to say, and you're drawing bad conclusions, which is case in point why likely you're incorrect, because you didn't even understand the argument. You didn't even understand the data points. You're just wanting to not be corrected and be stubborn and stiff-necked, which I hope not to be myself. So email me or put a comment section that's in there. This is going to be a little bit of a sticky episode here. Maybe some people might get a little bit offended with this, what I'm about to say here in a little bit. Maybe they ought to get offended with the slavery issue. I don't know. You just say that word and people freak out sometimes. So, but I want to move forward. So let's go ahead and let's get into past Isaiah chapter 14 and past that Daniel part that I shared, and let's go into what we covered earlier in Ephesians chapter 9. Sorry, there's no Ephesians 9. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 19. Making sure you're on your toes. Remember that once you were called nations in the flesh, but now you are without Messiah, but now that you're excluded from Yasharal and strangers from the covenants of promise. And then you have here in Ephesians 2, 19, so then you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens. So he says you're no longer strangers and foreigners. Yeah, Isaiah 14, 2 says that you shall take these strangers and foreigners, and they shall be servants and female servants, right? In which to serve, that these people are oppressors. Well, are people who are born of the Ruach oppressing those? Are those who are of the promise of Yitzhak oppressing? No, those that are not born according to promise, those Ishmaelites, those Ishmaelites in the analogy that persecuted and mocked Isaac, Yitzhak. That are those that are not born according to promise. So who are the strangers? Who are the gers? That is there. So I wanted to just kind of make that point. But now let's go to Zechariah 2:10 and 11. Man, so much information to go, so little time. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, but for look, I am coming and shall dwell in your midst, declares Yahuwah, and many nations shall be joined to Yahuwah in that day, and they shall become my people, no longer strangers and foreigners. And I shall dwell in your midst, right? That is what it means. If they're my people, then they're no longer strangers and foreigners. They are fellow citizens. And I shall dwell in your midst, and you shall know that Yahuwah Tzabaoth, Yahuwah of hosts, has sent me to you. So here we see, a prophecy with that. Let's go to Jeremiah 46:27. We're going to move a little bit quickly because I got a lot of information that I want to get forward through here. Jeremiah verse 46:27. Just want to make that understanding, of how Yahudim, right? Because we're going to be connecting this into those who say they are Yahudim and are not, but lie. And I'm going to connect this in with Babylon the Great in a future study soon to come. Yahuwah willing, that those who say they are Yahudim are in false religious houses. It's not just a bloodline, but it's also those who spiritually say they are thanking and praising and confessing sin and confessing his name, but lie. Because that's, remember, the root for Judah, for Yahuda, for Yahudim is Yada or Awada. It's a different rendition, depends on where you're finding the verse of Strong's number H3034. That this root word for Judah means to thank, to praise, to confess his name, Yahuwah's name, and to confess sin, or I should say to confess sin and also to confess Yahuwah's name. And to confess his name is calling on the character and authority and asking for him to save. All those calling on the name of Yahuwah shall be saved, shall be Yasha, have Yasha. And in Yasha is like a connection in with the salvation of Yahuwah, and that salvation of Yahuwah, coming into that name and calling on that name is connected with the word Yahudi, Yahudim, and that's who we're supposed to be in the spiritual sense. All of us are supposed to be Yahudim. So those who say they're Yahudim and not but lie, are those not the oppressors? Well, Galatians 4 talks about that, as well as other places, about the tale of two Yerushalayim and who was the persecutor and who was the persecuted. And we'll get into that in the tale of two Yerushalayim in the Babylon the Great study. But before we get into that, I just wanted you to understand that, who they says that say who are Yahudim, but not but lie. See, I shall come and make them worship before your feet. These people in these false worship houses systems that are stubborn and stiff-necked, that say that they are the worshipers of the Creator, that thank and praise his name, but mixed worship is mixed in Babel, mixed confused ways of the nations. Abominations are in with them, false teachings are in with them, lies are in with them, deceit of Satan is in with them, and all these religious houses. So who are really the oppressors? Is it those who have been called by Yahuwah's name and are now partakers of the covenant, or is it those who say who are Yahudim and lie? Are those who are taken captive, and are those the strangers that are brought in as slaves? Are those part of the kingdoms that are left alive for a season and a time? Well, we'll see soon enough which it is. But here we have in Jeremiah 46:27 that, let me see if I shall give them into the hand of those who seek their lives, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, sovereign of Babel, and into the hand of his servants, and afterward it shall be inhabited as in the days of old. But as for you, do not fear my servant Jacob, and do not be discouraged, O Yasharal. So why is it saying Jacob and Yasharal? Bloodline and spirit here, I believe. Spirit and truth. The truth is the bloodline. The spirit is those of Yasharal. Yasharal was a spiritual name given to the man. And Yasharal is a spiritual name given to all of those who overcome this world with Elohim. For look, I am saving you from afar, and your descendants from the far land of their captivity. Jacob shall return and shall have rest and be at ease with no one disturbing. Do not fear, O Jacob, my servant, declares Yahuwah, for I am with you, though I make a complete end of all the nations which I have driven you. Yet I do not make a complete end of you, but I shall reprove you in right ruling, and by no means leave you unpunished. I want you to understand, by no means leave you unpunished. This bloodline is by no means left unpunished. We're going to get into that. But again, he also calls him my servant. Jacob, my servant. That same word is for servant or slave. Awesome. And so those of Yaakov, that bloodline, you're also servants or slaves. So we should all rejoice because we are servants and slaves of righteousness. You are a servant of whatever overcomes you. And Yahuwah willing, it is the Ruach Kodesh that overcomes us. And then we wrestle against that and then prevail against this world with Elohim. But let's go ahead and move into the next portion here. And again, remember, he says, I do not make a complete end. So that is reference that there is a partial end. So not a complete end, but some of the bloodline is wiped out. And we'll get into that in Scripture. So more on this soon. So this is Isaiah, Yeshayahu 56:4. And so in Yeshayahu 56:4, we have, for thus said Yahuwah to the eunuchs who guard my Shabbaths, what has been is what will be. There's nothing new under the sun, right? To the eunuchs who guard my Shabbaths and have chosen what pleases me and are holding on to my covenant. We're going to see here, this is end days related. So the Sabbath is still applicable, guys. To them I shall give in my house and within my walls a place and a name better than that of sons and daughters. I shall give them an everlasting name that is not cut off, right? Well, Daniel got this because Daniel was forced into being a eunuch as Nebuchadnezzar did this. So to them I shall give Yeah, I said that. Verse 6, and also the sons of the foreigner who join themselves to Yahuwah to serve him and to Ahabath, to love Ahabath Hashem Yahuwah, to love the name of Yahuwah, to be his servants. All who guard the what? The Sunday? No. The Sunday skeletal sun god system? No, God. And I'm not meaning to be a joke on this, but we got to let the scripture is saying the Sabbath everywhere, guys. All who guard the Sabbath and not profane it, and are holding on to my covenant, them I shall bring into my set-apart mountain, and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their ascending offerings and their zabach, their sacrifices, are accepted on my altar, for my house is called a house of prayer for all the peoples. Ha Adonai Yahuwah, the Master Yahuwah, who gathers the outcast of Yasharal, declares, I gather still others to him, besides those who are gathered to him. So what do we see here? We see here bringing into Mount Zion, into his everlasting kingdom, those who are doing what? Who are guarding the Sabbath, which is the gateway into the laws and the Moedim, the holy days and the law, is the fourth commandment that the beast of Rome attacked. Check out the Mark of the Beast teaching season 1, episode 4, but check out the whole thing. It's an attack on the first 4 commandments, the Mark of the Beast is, and the first and greatest commandment. So it is here that is saying that their sacrifices are acceptable. Those who what? Are holding on to his covenant. And the covenant is everlasting. And the Torah is everlasting that is there. And they're guarding that Sabbath, which is an everlasting covenant, which we see in Exodus chapter 31, verses 13 through 17, that it is an everlasting covenant to those who are of Israel. And as we covered before, Israel is those who are of the bloodline and those who are grafted in. Israel is a code word for his people. Israel is found, according to BibleHub.com, 2,505 times. It says the word Christian 3 times. The whole book is about Israel. The whole book is about Israel. And Israel, the king of Israel, is who? Yahushua HaMashiach. And Israel means to overcome with El. And guess who overcame with the Father? Well, the Ruach of the Father came upon the Son, the only begotten Son, and with the Ruach of the Father, the Son was able to complete his mission. He too overcame with El. In Revelation 3:12, Yahushua says in 3 spots that he has an Elohim. His Elohim is the Father. He says that in 3 spots, Revelation 3:12. So we can't also disagree that Yahushua is the Father in that aspect, because he says that he has an Elohim. But, that word can get a little bit confusing to people if they're only using English terminologies, or if, maybe they're indoctrinated. Maybe I'm indoctrinated, but let's move forward on this. Is that basically people who guard this Sabbath, who guard that 4th commandment, which is the segue into the law and into Israel. It literally says that it is a sign of his people in Exodus chapter 31, 13 through 17. It is the oath. This is what marks his people, is this Sabbath. And that they hold on to the covenant, that means that through that their sacrifices are accepted. And we know from the Abomination of Desolation of series, what is a sacrifice? Well, it's the spiritual sacrifice that we're doing, that the people are doing, their life that they're sacrificing. Now, is the animal sacrificial system happening in the 1,000-year reign? Well, there's evidence that it is, actually. I don't want to get into that. Maybe yes, maybe no. Regardless, it's not going to break my. I don't think that necessarily is a salvational issue of that, because ultimately the continual sacrifice is not animal sacrifices, as we covered, in part 1, 2 of this series, but namely in the Abomination of Desolation. So let's go ahead and move forward. And let's go to, we covered Romans 2:28, but let's just kind of check that out again and just kind of re-highlight that part in this video series. In Romans 2:28, what does it say? It says, for he is not a Yahudi who is so outwardly, neither is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh, but a Yahudi, a Yahudim, right? A Yahudi singular form is he who is so inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart. So in spirit, not literally, whose praise is not from men, but from Elohim. So in that same terminology, do you remember the SoS, right? The Synagogue of Satan. They say they are Yahudim, but lie. So is it coming into focus? What's a Yahudi? What is that spiritual understanding of the word? It's the people who praise, thank, confess, sin and his name to Yahuwah. That is what they are talking about in that spiritual sense. And, we covered again, we saw this before, but, after the Ephesians chapter 2, talking about the citizenship, we were once strangers of the nations, excluded from the citizenship. But then in Ephesians 2:19, through Messiah, then we are sharers in the covenant, and we are part of that kingdom. We are part of the kingdom of Yasharal, of Israel. We are now included and fellow members in the body, no longer as strangers or gers, or as foreigners, but we are as naturally born, right? Those that are circumcised in the heart, which is what here Romans chapter 2:28 and 29 talk about. But then we have here in Ephesians chapter 3, verses 6, we have here the nations to be co-heirs, united in the same body, and partakers together in the promise of Messiah through the good news, of which I became a servant. So here's Paul saying he's a servant, according to the gift and the grace of Elohim given to me, according to the working of his power. The favor is the word grace in ISR. And then he says, for me, at the very least of the Kedoshim, the saints, says that he's to bring the good news of the unsearchable riches of Messiah among the nations. And he's saying that these nations are to be co-heirs, not ruled and oppressed under, but those who are of Elohim are part of that kingdom, not those who are the oppressors and the opposers. Those who gain that everlasting body are part of that kingdom. And we have here that for ages past that this secret is administered, but we have here that in that this been hidden in Elohim, who created Yahushua Mashiach. That is there. And so staying, the nations being co-heirs is a secret, but remember the beginning of the video series that Elohim wishes that none shall perish. We cover that in Ezekiel chapter 39, that none shall perish, but all turn from their wicked ways and live. So, John 4:22, when it says, you worship what you do not know, we worship what we know, because the deliverance is of the Yahudim. Well, that's a loaded statement. Yasha is of the Yahudim. The Yahudim, in the spiritual sense, are those who praise, worship, confess sin, and who confess the name of Yahuwah. And so our King and Savior would be the king of those who did that, though he didn't have sin of his own, but he did confess our sin for us and paid our sin in the sacrifice through the shedding of his blood, done once and for all. So when Paul says in Ephesians 3:6 that the nations are going to be co-heirs, well, this is what the good news of the kingdom is, the Besorah HaMalkuth. We are created in the image of Elohim. It's a direct attack. Satan has directly attacked us. Yahuwah wants all of us to come into salvation, to come into Yasha. So the bloodline was given covenants, and then it was eventually opened up, because this is a finite system. It is a system of causality, and time and certain rules and regulations have formed certain things to take effect. Here we have a system that has to be put in place, so a bloodline has to be selected, a bloodline has to be preserved. These covenants have to be established. The seed, which is of Messiah, Genesis chapter 3:15, which is connected with Galatians chapter 3:16, and then Galatians 3:29 says that we are co-heirs. And then, Romans 9:6, as we cover, we're going through some review stuff here, is that that they're not all Israel who are of Israel. Not all those of the bloodline are of those who are chosen into the everlasting kingdom. So this means that anyone who denies Yahushua as Messiah is by definition, check this out, a goy. Do you understand what I just said? Anyone who denies Yahushua as Messiah, regardless of your bloodline, because you either get cut off by unbelief, as Romans chapter 11 says, either a natural branch or the wild olive branch, that by lack of faith they are cut off, broken off. Only by their faith can they get grafted back in. Faith that Yahushua is Messiah. So what that means is that those who are broken off from what? From the one nation. And the one nation being Yasharal, Israel, those who overcome with El. If you don't have El, you can't be Israel. That's literally what that El means. The Yasharal, Israel, is that you have to have Elohim in order to overcome. And as we covered in 2 John chapter 1, only one chapter, in 1 John chapter 2, that no one that denies the Son has the Father. So the Father being Elohim, Son being Elohim. Therefore, anyone who denies Yahushua as Mashiach is by definition a goy, part of the goyim. It's a real shocker when you realize people that are of the Synagogue of Satan who claim to be Yahudim by blood, whatever, if the claim is accurate or not, even if it is accurate, claim to be Yahudim by blood but deny the Messiah, by definition they are a goy. The very thing that they hate is the very thing that many people are, speaking lies and hypocrisy, and their conscience is seared. Where's that? Timothy chapter 4, 1 and 2, I think. 2 Timothy 4, 1 and 2. I might be wrong on that. Maybe it's 1 Timothy 4, 1 and 2. But talking about the latter days, people that are speaking lies and hypocrisy. So regardless, again, anyone that is claiming to be Yahudim but denies the Messiah, or is inside a religious house that denies the Messiah, is under this Antichrist spirit, is by definition a goy. So that's interesting, huh? So in Romans chapter 2:9, it says that let's go ahead and turn there. In Romans chapter 2:9, very important point to understand this, that affliction and distress on every human being working what is evil of the Yahudi first, the Yahudim first, and also of the Greek, but esteem, respect, and peace to everyone working what is good, to the Yahudi first and also to the Greek, for there is no partiality to Elohim. So he says that there's no partiality, but he says first and then second. To the Yahudi first and also of the Greek. So what is that meaning here? What does that mean? Evil, let's break that down on the evil sense. It's a lot easier to see it in the evil sense for the teaching that I'm about to share with you. So what does it mean that affliction and distress on every human being working what is evil of the Yahudi first and also of the Greek? Well, as we covered before, Yahudi can be talking about those who claim to be Yahudim through blood, who are under certain covenants from their ancestors, but it can also be from those who claim to be worshiping the Creator in false religious households in the spiritual sense. So it can be taken in both ways. And the Greek can be taken, the Greek can be taken in that understanding as well. Is that it can be talking about someone who is someone who is of the nations that is not yet grafted in, more so than someone who is just of that bloodline, the Greek. So if he's using the word Greek and it's not necessarily just meaning the Greek bloodline, then it would also have to refer to something that's not just the Yahudi bloodline also. There's a spiritual sense to the word that is there. But why does it say the Yahudi first and also to the Greek? And this is a really important point to understand. So with that, I want to move really quickly on this. I don't want to take too long on it. Joshua chapter 7 verses 10. If anyone knows about Israel who has sinned, why did Israel sin? Well, let me see here where it's at. So the men, 3,000 men, went up against the city Ai, and Ai came out and struck 36 men, killed them. 36 men died. Why? Well, they shouldn't have lost a single one. Yahuwah was in their camp. They shouldn't have lost a single soldier. So the fact that 36 men died, they realized that there was something wrong. that the Creator wasn't fighting on their side. So they went back into their camp. Yahuwah spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him that Yasharal Israel sinned. And then Joshua went through the tribes according to the clans, leader by leader, household by household, man by man, until like an electrician finds a fault code, until the tribe of Yehuda was taken, and then of the clan of the Zarchites, and then of Zabdi, and then by Zabdi you get Achan. And now you have Achan, and Achan was found to have the sin, and they asked him, hey, what happened? So he didn't come forward and confess the sin. He didn't talk about the things that happened. He waited for 36 men to die, and now he's going to make his confession. Now he's going to make that confession and declare what it is. And then he's like, oh, truly I sinned, right? Crocodile tears, when he said that he saw, a spoil of a lovely garment from Shinar, a Babylonian-ish garment, by the way, fringes and tassels of Babylon is on his garment. If you remember the seats conversation we had in the previous episode, or was it the episode before that, earlier in this series, and then he took silver, and then he took gold, and then hid him in the ground in his tent. And so they went and found it just as he said. And what did they do? They took this man Achan with all of the items, and his sons and his daughters and his oxen and his donkeys and his sheep and his tent and all that he had, including that Babylonian fringed garment, and brought them to the valley of Achor. And then they all stoned him with stones, and then they burned him with fire after they stoned him with stones. And they put a heap of stones there to remind people of what the sin of Achan is. So what does this pertain? How does this pertain to the Jew first, to the Yahudi first, and also of the Greek? How does this pertain to that? How does that pertain? Well, Yahudi is talking about what? Yahudi is talking about those who claim to be those who praise and to thank and to confess before Yahuwah their sin and his name. That is what the word Yahudi means. So why to them first and to the Greek second? Well, because Yahuwah has established a precedent as his one nation was going out and driving out the wickedness of those of the nations and the Canaanites in the land of Canaan because of the evil that they have done. And according to the promises that were given to the forefathers of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that as they're going out and dispossessing this land from its wickedness, that sin was then found in their camp, and they were no longer able to remove sin from the outside world because now sin was found from within. So because sin was found from within, they had to stop doing what they were doing, take care of the sin in-house. Then after they took care of the sin in-house, then they could start purifying the nations again. Because someone that has a dirty house and that is going to go help their neighbor to go clean their house is in hypocrisy, especially if they're telling their neighbor and making them feel bad about how dirty their house is. If someone doesn't have their own house in order, then they have no business trying to help anyone. If someone doesn't have their own house in order, according to 1 Timothy chapter 3, you cannot be an elder or a ministerial servant, a bishop or a deacon, whatever word you want to put there. You can't be a part of the congregation's leadership if your own house is in order, or you have these major glaring problems that are reprovable. You have to be unreprovable. Why? Because you can't have sin within your own house. You can't be expected to help out others if you are a mess. It is simple logic, which is why are we trying to go to the moon or Mars? Whether you believe in space or not, why are people trying to go up there when our own house is a mess and is dying? Have no business going up there into the heavens, into that second heaven, whatever you want to call that is there. So that is the sin of Achan. Let's look at another precedent here in Matthew chapter 7. Do not judge lest you be judged. Close the book. That's it. Don't judge lest you be judged. Is that what it's talking about? No, it's telling us to judge. Part of judging, loving your neighbor as yourself in Leviticus chapter 19, 17, and 18 is to, well, let's just go there and I'll show you just so that you understand that I'm not just, saying words. In Leviticus 19, 17 and 18, part of loving your neighbor as yourself, right? And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Part of loving your neighbor as yourself is not hating your brother, is reproving. Well, in order to reprove, you have to know right and wrong. You have to know between clean and unclean, holy and unholy, clean and profane. You need to have understanding as what a priest would have, in order to be able to reprove your neighbor. And you need to do what? For certain, bear no sin because of him. Why? Because of the sin of Achan. If you don't reprove your neighbor, then you are complicit. So we are not to take vengeance or bear a grudge. Yeah, don't hold a grudge. We're doing so in loving kindness. And this is what loving your neighbor as yourself is not just loving yourself and keeping yourself set apart, but making sure that your neighbors are set apart in a non-hypocritical, loving way to help our brothers to be able to what? Not have this sin in them, or at least not to be participatory in sin. We see this in one other spot, and I'll show you here. This is something that I feel called. This is why I'm sharing this information in my my last moments here before I have to leave, is Ezekiel 33, 7 and 8 and 9. Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Yasharal, and you shall hear a word from my mouth, and you shall warn them for me. I have heard these warnings about the prophetic understandings, about this teaching, the other teachings, the ones to come. I got to share this information, because if I don't, what's going to happen? When I say to the wrong, O wrong one, you shall certainly die, and you have not spoken to warn the wrong from his way, that wrong one shall die in his crookedness, and his blood I require at your hand. That means that someone that doesn't share a message when they're supposed to, and that person dies in their sins, that means that that individual is held accountable, especially if they are explicitly given instruction to share a message. But when you have warned the wrong, whether they accept it or not, to turn from his way, and he has not turned from his way, he shall die in his crookedness, but you have delivered your soul, your being. So this is in connection with loving your neighbor as yourself, and it's in connection with what? Judging your neighbor, showing them what right and wrong is. Part of loving your neighbor is reproving him and not bearing sin because of him, but it also means in order to do this, you got to have your own house in order. So connecting that with Matthew chapter 7, is that what it's saying? Do not judge lest you be judged? No, we are to judge what? For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged, and with the same measure you use, it shall be measured to you. This is where loving kindness comes in play. And why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye, but you do not notice a plank in your own eye? I've done this analogy before, but what does the splinter in your eye mean? Well, if you have a sin in your eye, it's right in front of you and it's huge and it's big, and you can't see past it. But in your neighbor's eye, if this same thing is far away, is very small in perception of yourself, all the way over in your neighbor's house, you can almost barely see it. But sin is sin. So when you see how to remove that sin, that very same sin from your eye, then you can help remove from your neighbor's eye. That's what I was doing with cannabis commotion. And in the 5-part series that I have in cannabis commotion, it's because I had that in my eye, and I want to help my brothers to remove that. I also need to be bold and not to allow people to be complacent with what I've been told is bad doctrine. Whether you want to believe me or not about cannabis, I've been told that, and I had to share that information lest I have blood guilt on my head. So Matthew 7:3, it says, so why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not notice a plank in your own eye? Or how is it that you say to your brother, let me remove the splinter out of your eye, and see a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite. So it's all about hypocrisy. Don't be a hypocrite. First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you shall see clearly to remove the splinter out of your brother's eye. Now the next verse is the one that we all know at the end of my segment. Do not give what is set apart to the dogs, nor throw your pearls before the pigs, lest they trample under your feet and turn and tear you in pieces. This is part of Proverbs 9, 6 through 10. Make sure you're not reproving a wrong one or a scoffer, lest you get a blemish or they hate you. But make sure that you're giving this information to wise people, and they shall love you. By their fruits you shall know them. If someone is really walking in the flesh, and you share with them some refined information, and they kind of get all offensive on that, you can have a pretty good idea that maybe you shouldn't share that information with that person, or maybe that person wasn't ready at that point in time. You got to let the Ruach decide of who you are to say to what, but just beware lest someone turn and trample on you because you're speaking truth. When Messiah spoke truth, they tried to kill him. And he says that a servant is not greater than its master. But see, here we see that you have to take care of your own house, the sin in your own eye, to see the sin in your neighbor's eye and remove that. This is a analogy that is there. And then we also see in Matthew chapter, where is that, 23? I don't think I have this one down, but let me try to find it here real quick. Pretty sure it's in 23. Talking about cleaning the outside of the cup and not cleaning the inside of the cup. Here it is, verses 25. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are filled with plunder and unrighteousness. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, so that the outside of them becomes clean too. So we see that this precedent is there. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have it on the scriptures. I'm talking to you as I'm looking at the scriptures. I'm thinking that you're seeing. I apologize, but again, I try to do this in one take without any editing. I don't have time. I got to get this information out. So what do we see here in the sin of Achan, the splinter in the eye, loving your neighbor as yourself and reproving and not bearing sin because of him? Ezekiel chapter 33, 7 through 10, of being a watchman and sharing information you're told to share, lest you be accountable for their blood guilt. But if you do share, you're not accountable. And connecting with cleaning the inside of the cup before you clean the outside. How is that connected to the Yahudi first and also of the Greek? How is that directly connected? Well, it is very much connected. Let's go there so you can see that scripture verse once again. This is in Romans chapter 2, verses 9. Probably helps if I go there, huh? In Romans chapter 2, 9 here, affliction and distress on every human being working what is evil, of the Yahudi first and also of the Greek. Well, what's it saying there? Now, is it saying of the bloodline first and then those on the non-bloodline? I would say no, because I understand who Babylon the Great is. It's more than just bloodline. It's those who say they are Yahudim and are not, but lie, but are a synagogue of Satan. They are an assembly of Satan, and they are in what? In Babylon the Great, false house religions. Now, why? So that if the woman, we'll get a little bit of a teaser of Babylon the Great. If the woman is a beast represents a kingdom, and the kingdom represents the kingdom of the nations. Well, if the woman is of the nations, then she would herself be part of the beast, but she is separate and sitting on top of, but is fornicating with. So this would have to be someone that is claiming to be set apart, claiming to be a virgin to Messiah, as 2 Corinthians chapter 11:2 says, that we are supposed to be a virgin before Messiah to one husband, but it's someone who is being a harlot with the ways of the nations and the mixed ways of man and the false religious, systems of man, and they're fornicating with the false ideologies of man and using mixed worship in there, then what it is that she is not part of the nation, because clearly she sits on top. So she has to be of a rebellious household who is not of the nations, but claims to be of the Creator, but is fornicating with other Elohim. Where do we see that? We see that with the rebellious house of Yasharal, whether in spirit or in bloodline, that we see those that are rebelling, and we see this time and time again in the Old and in the New Testament, and it comes into its fullness in Babel the Great, which should be a key word of understanding who she is it is not the mixing of the American ways and the Roman ways, or the American ways and the the Babylonian ways or the Persian ways and the Egyptian ways. It's the mixture of his way, the Rech HaKodesh, the way of holiness, with the ways of the nations, the unclean ways of the nations. And they are fornicating with that. So Babel the Great is the great confusing. Babel means confusion, to mix, to scatter. The great confusion, the great mixing, the great scattering of what? His truth, his Torah, his Ruach Kodesh, his Amunah, his faith, his Holy Spirit. It's the mixing of the truth, spirit and truth, the faith in the commandments, faith in Yahushua Mashiach, that he is Yasha, he is the salvation, and walking in his character, and then also the mixture of the commandments, and mixing those commandments of Elohim and messing with the spirit and truth and not walking in spirit and truth, but claiming that they do. And so why is it that the Babylon the Great gets judged first? Why does she get judged first and the beast second? Because it's the same thing here with the Yahudi first and also of the Greek to everyone who is working what is evil. He cleans his own house. This is a precedent that is set all throughout the scriptures. They clean their, in Hezekiah, they did the same thing. Hezekiah was cleaning his own house first, and then after his own house was purified and cleaned, then the Father purified 185,000 soldiers that were outside of Jerusalem, with King Sennacherib of the Assyrians. So we see this time and time again all throughout the scriptures. I'm only thinking of these. I'm sure I can think of more if I put my mind to it, but I've shared enough of the precedent that's there. Why to the Yahudi first? Because the person who claims to be Yahudi, who is SoS, the Synagogue of Satan, but is in fact lying, that they are not a Yahudim, they are not someone who is thanking and praising Yahuwah or according to confessing his name, his character, his olive oil which is within them, his understanding. His name is oil, good oil poured forth. In Song of Solomon 1:3, these wise virgins that have the oil in them. The command is the lamp, and the Torah, is what is within us. These instructions, and his Ruach Kodesh, which is his character, which is that refined oil that we've been understanding his character, is what lights our way. But those who claim to be Yahudi, but are these foolish virgins that don't have his Ruach, that don't have his character in them. And so when the time comes to where they have to light that character, they have to see the way in the darkness, they don't know what he wants or what he doesn't want. So they want to get that oil from the wise, but it says to buy the truth and do not sell it. And who is the way, the truth, and the life? And who is the light of the world? As we know, Messiah. And so they wanted to what? They wanted to buy Messiah, and so they said, go buy from those who sell. Go to those houses that claim to sell that refined olive oil, that claim to sell his true character. You should be organically growing his character, name, and authority from within you. Those foolish virgins didn't want to do it on their own. They wanted to outsource it, just as the Laodicean church in Revelation 3 says. And so they went to go get it. And by the time they tried to get it, they come to the door of the master. They're like, hey, let us in. And he says, I never knew you, those who work lawlessness. Why? Why do they work lawlessness? There's no Torah in them. There's no truth in them. His name is not in them. His character is not in them. His olive oil is not in their lamp. They don't even understand that what the Torah is supposed to run on. They think that all you have to do is just have the scriptures and believe in the scriptures and sit back on your armchair, and when the time comes, everything's just going to be granted for you, and you don't have to put any time and effort in. Sacrifice. We sacrifice our time. We don't kill our time. We rightfully sacrifice our time, which is what you're doing by sitting here learning. And I ask, if you can remember, share, give a like, but subscribe, whatever. I care that you share this information with others, but most importantly, make it your own. I hope this helps you. I hope you take my time sacrifice in respect, because I definitely have a lot to do, but I would rather be doing this, which is why I'm here. And so why do the Yahudi first and the Greek second? Well, we covered. It's to the believer or the false believer, the evil, someone who say they are and not, the SoS first, the Babylon the Great first, and then to the Greek, the nation second, the unbeliever second. So it's that standard precedent, that precept that is there of why that is there. So when it says in Romans 3:1-2, what is the advantage of the Yahudi? Let's go ahead there. And it says, what is the advantage of the Yahudi, or what is the value of circumcision? Much in every way, because firstly, indeed, they were entrusted with the words of Elohim. Now, what does it say there? Does it say that they are entrusted or that they were entrusted? Regardless, as you may remember in the prophecy given to Judah in Genesis chapter 49 verses 8-10 is that Judah says that scepter, that rulership, and the inscriber, that written word will not pass until Shiloh comes. Well, Shiloh came. And they were entrusted with these words of Elohim. They were entrusted with the advantage of the Yahudi. They were entrusted with this circumcision, which is not outward but inward. They were entrusted with this. But does it say does it say that they were entrusted with all the right interpretations? Does it say that they're not going to create false religious houses of confusion, of Babylonian mixing and confusion, and Greco-Romanization of incorrect interpretations of the scripture? No, it doesn't. In Matthew 23:15, let's go ahead and turn there. We've been there before, but let's look again. In Matthew chapter 24:15, it says, 23:15, it says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You go about the land and sea. We covered that land beast and the sea beast, Revelation 13, which get thrown into Gehenna in Revelation 19:20. It says that when you win a convert, a proselyte, that means that they get converted into the Pharisaical false Judaism way, which was in existence 2,000 years ago, that all the apostles came out of. Peter came out of it. Paul came out of it, right? Kepha and Shaul, James and John, Jacob and Yahukanan came out of it, and it says that when he's won, you make him a son of Gehenna twofold more than yourselves. So again, yes, the Yahudi, the Yahudim, those that are Yahudim on the inside were entrusted with this, the good side of the patriarchs, but there's also that spirit of rebellion, that Jezebel spirit that's there, and that's really what we're focusing on is that they make these converts into these false religious ways. Remember what it says here in Matthew 23:3, whatever they say to you to guard. Well, why is Messiah, who's calling them vipers and serpents and a brood of adders, filled with dead man's bones, they're blind guides, blind leading the blind, and that Satan is their father, and that he is a murderer and a liar, and they are doing the works of Satan. And then all of a sudden in Matthew 23:3, you think he literally tells you to do whatever the Pharisees say as they're sitting in the seat of Moses? No, the Shem Tob and not always is the minority correct. In this aspect, the minority is correct. I believe it says whatever Moses says to you to guard and do, but don't do according to what the Pharisees do. That's pretty simple. That's pretty simple stuff. So, and we cover that in John 8:39, to where, they're arguing with him and then arguing with them about their works. And he says that their works are of the father of the devil, and that he's a murderer and a liar, just like they are. So who has been entrusted with the words of Elohim? Who is the one that the law was given to? Those who say they are and are not, but lie, those in the false religious houses? Or is it those who are faithful, that faithful there? So we covered, remember, in Genesis 49:10, that scepter doesn't, that scepter, as it says, the scepter shall not turn aside from Yahudah. This would also be from the Yahudim, nor an inscriber from between his feet until Shiloh comes. So remember, we covered in the last episode, in the previous one, that in Deuteronomy 18:18 and Acts 3:22, it's confirmation that prophet that's raised up from their midst of their brothers is Yahushua HaMashiach, and that is the Shiloh that comes. But what happens to those who don't listen to Shiloh? Are those that kill Yahushua or participate in denying him, are they free from punishment? punishment, because only through Messiah do we get away from the law, the curses that the law entail. Only through him can we get the removal of the law and sin and death and get the redemption and the forgiveness of sins. Without Messiah, we all are sinners, and if those who are under the bloodline covenants are under this, then they would be directly enacted to the Yahudi first, and to the Greek second, to the so-called believer first, and to the unbeliever second. Are they free from punishment? No, they are part of those curses that are there. So is anyone familiar with Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26? Well, we're going to get into that like right now, briefly as we covered. Remember, Matthew chapter 27. Let's go ahead and look there, and then we're going to go into the blessings and curses. So Matthew chapter 27, verse 25 says, talking about Messiah, about his crucifixion, Pilate saying, what shall I do to him? And then he says that I'm innocent of the blood of this righteous one. All the people say, and his blood be on us and on our children. Then they release Barabbas, which means Bar is son and Abba is father, son of the father. And they say his name was Yeshua Barabbas, the salvation, son of the father. They released the wrong salvation there. They released the wrong one that wanted to start a revolt and not wanted to bring mankind into righteousness through Torah. In the fullness of it, in the redemption of sin and of repentance of sins, acknowledging that we've been doing incorrectly and that we need to come out of these false religious houses like the Pharisees and scribes and all those in that period in time, and brought into a pure and clean virgin understanding in the simplicity which is Messiah, 2 Corinthians 11:2. So here, let his blood be on us and on our children. Well, what they did is enacted the curses. The only way out of this, well, let's look what verse is directly connected with that is Leviticus chapter 26. This is the blessings and curses chapter. And right here in verse 40, he says, but if they confess their crookedness and the crookedness of their fathers. Well, is this talking about 10-tribe kingdom scattered? Yes. But is this talking about the 2-tribe kingdom? Yes. Now, did the 10-tribe kingdom get a certificate of divorce? Yes. But did the 2-tribe kingdom hold on? Well, it says in Romans chapter 11 that through unbelief, those of that bloodline are broken off. So is there a faithful remnant that did not bow the knee to Baal? Romans 11 also says this. Yes. He always it keeps that remnant. So there is a remnant of the bloodline 2-tribe kingdom that held on to that truth and that spirit that did not bend the knee. However, those that are of that bloodline that did not believe are cut off, and only through faith can they be grafted back in, just like the wild olive tree can be grafted back in when they're producing olives, or when they're prepared and the Messiah comes in through their faith and connects them into the root, and then they start producing olives through their faith. The works are produced through connection into his righteousness, connection into him as Yasha, as the salvation, as the salvation of Yahuwah, as Yahushua, a Hamashiach. Those that are connected in through faith, through Amunah, then start producing righteous fruits like olives. Then can the wild branch be grafted in, and then only can the natural branch that was broken off through disbelief, through lack of faith, be brought into the root and grafted back into the promises which are of its own bloodline. But it doesn't matter spirit or natural bloodline. Through faith only, both of them are connected in. And through lack of faith, both of them are broken off. And that's what it says. So in Leviticus 26:40, through the lack of faith, those that denied him, let his blood be on us and on our children, and that have connected themselves with the spirit of Antichrist under the Babylonian confused religion of the Talmudic Judaism, the Messiah came to break the back of and expose that they doubled, tripled, quadrupled down, septupled down in the wickedness, and they held on to these false ways. then they enacted these curses upon them, these blood curses. And all those of Messiah listened to Messiah and fled when the time came. I'll get into that shortly. But those who were under this false religious house stayed. They stayed where? In Jerusalem in 70 AD, thinking that they are going to be protected supernaturally, as he protected out of Egypt, as he protected as he protected with Sennacherib, with Hezekiah's day. They thought they were in the right. They thought they were doing right. They were so prideful, unwilling to admit that of what they did after all the warnings that they're given through the 40 years from 30 AD to 70 AD or 31 to 70 AD. That 40-year period in time that is there, that they refused to repent, and they took it to that degree. And what happened to them? Well, let his blood be on us and on our children. Well, those people in Jerusalem suffered a terrible fate, and those that were left, they continued walking in the spirit of the Antichrist, under the spirit of Babylonian Talmudic twisted interpretations of Torah, refused to accept, and then became what? They became enemies according to the good news, as Galatians 11:28 warns us. For as far as the good news' sake, they are enemies. Now they are beloved as far as the choice through their bloodline. They are allowed to be grafted in, and he does have compassion on those because he made a promise with the bloodline to not make a complete end, but he does not say that he's going to save all of them. Some of that is gross misinterpretation of scriptures, not understanding that when he says he's going to save all of Israel, but also that not all Israel is Israel, or saying that he's going to save the Yahudim, but not all Yahudim are Yahudim. Not all Christians follow Christ. Not all, not all Jehovah's Witnesses are witnesses of Jehovah. Not all that are Protestants are protesting the skeletal structure of the Roman Catholic Church. These words can get perverted really easy when you don't understand. But in Leviticus 26:40, it says, if they confess their crookedness and the crookedness of their fathers, and they walk contrary to him for sure by denying the only begotten Son and killing them, only after they confess those sins can the covenant with Jacob and Yitzhak and Abraham and remember the land. So the only way to come back into the land and come back into power and come back into these covenants and be grafted back into the root is to turn back, and admit what was done. Well, this is where the confusion of people not knowing where their roots are, where their history comes from. But let's move forward. So in Messiah's day, let his blood be on us and on our children. This enacted the curses. And so in the curses of Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26, we can follow the two-tribe kingdom through these curses. So we'll see one thing in 1 Thessalonians 2:14. So in 1 Thessalonians 2:14, it says, for you, brothers, became imitators of the assemblies of Elohim, which are in Yehuda, in Messiah Yahusha. So that means that those that are in this region in Judea, that they are imitators of the assemblies of who? Of the Yahudim? No, of Elohim, which are in this region, Judea, in Messiah Yahusha, because you also suffered the same treatment from your own countrymen as they also from the Yahudim. Now, this is being used in the derogatory term. I would say that this, even though it doesn't say Judaism, is connected to those that are under the spell of Judaism, the power and principality of this hatred of the truth. And if they hate the master, they definitely are going to hate the servant. So who kill both the master, Yahushua, and their own prophets, and have persecuted us. Galatians 4 talks about this. And who displease Elohim and are hostile to all men, because they think they're better than everyone because of their flesh. It is a satanic delusion, and it gets worse, as we're going to see here shortly. So we have here, in 1 Thessalonians 2:16, forbidding us to speak to the nations. Why? Because they say that they're better than everyone, that they're just animals in human bodies. We cover this in part 1, that they might be saved so as to fill up their sins always, but the wrath has come upon them to the utmost. What do you think this means? But the wrath has come upon them to the utmost. The wrath of who? Of these false Yahudim, who are under this power and principality of persecuting the true believers. Galatians 4, when we get into Babylon the Great, we'll talk about this in detail, and I want you to remember this if I forget this point to connect it. The wrath has come upon them to the utmost. What do you mean by that? What do you mean? Well, let his blood be on us and on our children. This is that same Antichrist Judaism religion that the first century's apostles came out of. The same Antichrist Judaism religion that Messiah said that they shut up in Matthew 23:17, that they shut up the kingdom of heavens before men, for you do not go in, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. These are the same that died in 70 AD and the same people that compiled the Talmudic Antichrist doctrine that I talked about in part 1. If you haven't seen it, I don't want to repeat it again. You need to go see the wickedness, and I only shared a little smidgen of that of the wickedness that's in there. It's the same thing that says that the wrath of Elohim has come upon them. The people that's held on to this false religious belief didn't want to admit they're wrong, extremely stiff-necked in the blood, thinking that they're saved by their flesh, and now they're writing these Babylonian Antichrist documents and compiled them into one super wicked document, and this is where people are going to learn their Torah understandings, brother Judah, and they are learning this stuff. This twisted Torah Babylonian interpretations. If you want to go learn about Messiah, why would you go into the institutions of sun god system that Constantine started in the Romanized rendition of Christianity? And you want to learn about Torah, why would you go to the twisted interpretations that Nebuchadnezzar taught them through teachings of Nimrod, the twisted understandings of truth? Why would you go and learn from the people in the religious houses that have established that level of deception, the same one that people were called out of 2,000 years ago? And you think that those Torah interpretations are what it is? The things that those people teach, it's a joke. But we'll get into that. Regarding the bloodline, right? They're warned about disobedience. Do you think that killing the only begotten son goes unpunished? Well, the wrath has come upon them to the utmost. So repentance does carry a lot of weight, but this is for the stiff-necked and prideful who have been broken off because of unbelief, and they go through the curses, unfortunately. And this is not the boast or I'm sharing this because people need to understand where their roots are. Everyone in the world, we all came through Noach at some point. And some drop of blood, and we need to repent. Because we all fell away from that righteous man's understanding and teachings that were given to him. So, people that want to take the curses of the full distance are going to end up in death, ultimately. Because that's what the law of sin and death leads to. Only faith in Messiah Yahushua is what helps us. So let's look at a couple prophecies that are related. 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 12. So in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 12, we have, now this was given to, I'm in 2 Corinthians. I'm like, why is that not working here? 2 Chronicles 7:12. There we go. That's it. In 2 Chronicles 7:12, Yahuwah appeared to Shlomo, Solomon, by night and said, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. Zabach. If I shut up the heavens and there is no rain, or I command the locust to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, and my people upon whom my name is called, that is the code word for Yahudim, right? And shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face. Notice to humble themselves and turn from their what? Their evil ways. Then I shall hear from the heavens and forgive their sin and heal their land. Now my eyes are open and my ears are attentive to the prayer of this place. And now I have chosen and set this house apart for my name to be there forever. What? His house? Well, as Stephen says in Acts chapter 9, that Yahuwah does not make live or establish. He is not in a house of stone. What place can man make that he would reside? He is a ruach. He resides within his children. So what is this house that he made his name set apart to be there forever? and that his eyes and heart shall always be there. Well, that house was destroyed when Nebuchadnezzar came in. So it can't be talking about this house to have his name there forever. In that aspect, there's got to be more to it. And then he says, here's the addendum, here's the catch. And if you walk before me, if you walk before me as your father David, and you do all according to as your father David walked, and do according to all I have commanded you. And if you guard my laws and my right rulings, then I shall establish the throne of your kingdom, as I covenanted with Daud your father, saying, there is not to cease a man of yours as ruler in Yasharal. But these are contingencies. If you turn away and forsake my laws and my commands, which I have set before you, and you shall go and serve other Elohim, which he did in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1 through 11, verses 5 through 7 specifically. Serve other Elohim and bow yourself to them, then I shall pluck them from my land, which I have given them. In this house, which I have set apart for my name, I shall cast out of my sight and make it a proverb and a mockery among all peoples. So we see here that this is a prophecy given. So where else do we see that warning that is continuing? They say, let's read 21 and 22. In this house by which has been exalted, everyone who passes by it shall be astonished and say, why has Yahuwah done thus to this land and to this house? Then they shall say, because they forsook Yahuwah, Elohim of their fathers, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, Mitzrayim, and embraced other Elohim gods, and bowed themselves to them and served them. Therefore he has brought all this evil upon them. Where else do we see a parallel prophecy in this? Is right after the blessings and curses chapter in Deuteronomy, almost word for word, chapter 29, starting in verse 22. And the generation to come of your children who rise up after you, and the foreigner who comes from a far land, shall say when they see the plagues of that land and the sickness which Yahuwah has sent to it. Right? And they see this in verse 24, and all the nations say, why has Yahuwah done so to this land, and what does the heat of this great displeasure mean? Well, that is exactly what was told to Solomon when he made that temple. And it shall be said, because they have forsaken the covenant of Yahuwah, Elohim of their fathers, which he made with them when he brought out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, and when they went and served other Elohim, other gods, right? What do they say in John chapter 19, was it 14 and 15? They say, we have no king but Caesar. They bowed down to a different king. Caesar was seen as a god. They're seen as a different king. They bowed down to him. They served themselves after other mighty ones, after other false Elohim. And so why did the Pharisees and Judaism get kicked out? Because they were in bed and fornicating with the ways of the nations. Therefore, the displeasure of Yahuwah burned against this land to bring on every curse that is written in the book, and Yahuwah uprooted them from their land. This is 70 AD, in displeasure and in wrath and in great rage, and cast them into another land as it is today. The secret matters belong to Yahuwah, our Elohim, but what is revealed belongs to us and to our children forever to do all the words of this Torah. This is a prophecy. And when you go into the next verse, it says here that in the end days, and I've covered this before, that this is connected with Matthew 24:31, Deuteronomy 30 verse 4, showing this is an end days prophecy. And in this end days prophecy, they come back to the very commands today, with all their heart and all their soul. And in verse 30, it says that they are following the guard of his commands and his laws, which are written in this book of the law. Only if they turn back to Yahuwah with all your heart and soul. This is part of the prophecy. In the Solomon prophecy was then reenacted again after the temple was destroyed and then brought back and then destroyed again. That was brought back in 70 AD. And those who said that let his blood be on us and on our children enacted that. So, in Matthew chapter 15, he says that 15:3, we'll go there. In Matthew chapter 15:3, he says, But he, Yahushua, said to them, why do you also transgress the command of Elohim because of your tradition? Now he's knocking Judaism directly. What did Paul say in Galatians 1:14? That he ardently held the traditions of the fathers, and he says the word Judaism. So here Messiah is pointed at the false system of Judaism directly and saying, why do you also transgress the command of Elohim because your tradition? He's saying, why are you following men or false god systems because of your tradition? You are trying to overthrow what the commands say. And then in 7 and 8, he says, hypocrites, Yeshayahu, Isaiah rightly prophesied about you, saying, these people draw near me with their mouth and respect me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain they do worship me. Teaching is the teachings of the commands of men. We see this in the Romanized houses of Christianity, and we see this in the Babylonianized houses of Judaism, as well as all other false religions that claim to be of the Torah, that claim to be of a set-apart faith, that claim to be of the Abrahamic understanding, but lie. They claim to be Yahudim, but lie. So what does it say in Proverbs 21:27 regarding someone that is sacrificing incorrectly? Proverbs 21:27 says, 21, not 27. It says, the sacrifice of the wrong, the zabach of the wrong is an abomination. How much more when he brings it with wickedness? So wickedness is what? Filthiness of her whoring, bringing the ways of the nations, trying to come to negate the command of Elohim, to hold a man-made tradition, a false house, claiming you're Yahudim and not, lying, impurifying his house. So he's saying that the sacrifice of the wrong is an abomination. And the Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and of the abominations of the earth. That's what Revelation 17:5 says. These abominations are false sacrifices to wicked ways. So, I want to connect this point now. Now, this is in connected with Matthew 27:25, let his blood be on us and on our children. Now, as you know, the teachings of Messiah in Luke 21:20, he says, and when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that its laying waste is near, its desolation is near. This is a partial fulfillment in 70 AD. And when you understand Babylon the Great, you're going to understand that this is actually going to happen again into its fullness under the fullness of Babylon the Great. But when 66 AD, when they were surrounded in 66 AD, Jerusalem was, those of Messiah that were left saw this, and then the army left. They realized that was a fulfillment of his words. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that his desolation is near, and they fled. And then 4 years later, the Roman army comes back. How many believers that had their roots weren't deep enough, and they went back like a dog to their vomit? And they went back to Jerusalem, and they were cast in with a lot of the unbelievers. Sad if some did, that didn't have the faith to last, to stay away from that city, because maybe they felt they were in love. As Hebrews 13:14, we have no lasting city here, but we seek the one coming. That is the one that maker and hand created by Elohim. Heavenly Jerusalem, as Hebrews 12:22 and 23 say. We know this information. So, so as those in Judaism sunk deeper and deeper, they eventually didn't call on his name, his character, or authority. They didn't walk as he walked. And so how can those that are not calling on his name, power, character, and authority, who deny that he even is the son of Elohim, they got, there is no distinction, Romans 10:12, between the Yahudi and the Greek. Those that are doing evil, to the Yahudi first, and to the Greek second, to the believer or the so-called believer first, and to the non-believer second. So we've covered this in 1 John 2:22 and 23. It says that who is a liar but he who denies Yahushua is the Christ. This is the Antichrist, he who denies the Father and the Son. No one who denies the Son has the Father. Whoever confesses the Son has the Father also. So the Talmud was written after Messiah died and resurrected resurrected, compiled between the 3rd and the 6th century AD, long after the Antichrist spirit took root, long after that they were given plenty of time to repent for their sins, long after they were exposed for their false religious house, and then persecuting the believers, whether it's getting others to do their bidding for them or they themselves are doing it. So, therefore, who wrote the compilation of the Talmud? It was wrote with those without accepting Yahushua as being Mashiach. So this very religion, Yahuwah called them blind guides repeatedly in Matthew 23, called them a brood of serpents, den of vipers, that they don't enter into the kingdom of heaven, nor do they allow others to enter in, that anyone that is proselytized by them is twice as likely to go into Gehenna as they are. This is all found in Matthew chapter 23. Call them blind leaders of the blind, that they both fall into the ditch. So therefore, by definition, if they don't have the Son, they can't have Elohim. So how can you say that this religion is led by the Most High? This is the power and spirit and principality of this. And how can you say that this is any different than following some Romanized version of Christianity, of New Testament? It's the same tactic, just with a different false religious house. Again, 1 John 2:23, no one denying the Son as the Father, the one confessing the Son has the Father as well. In 2 Peter 2:1-3, let's go ahead and turn there. In 2 Peter 2:1-3, we're almost done. Thank you so much for sticking with me. 2 Peter 2:1-3 says, but there also came to be false prophets among the people, as also among you there shall be false teachers, who shall secretly bring in destructive heresies and deny the master who brought them. Well, this is Judaism 101 here. Bring swift destruction on themselves. Well, that's 70 AD 101. And many shall follow their destructive ways. This is the whole exile, because of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. They're speaking evil of the Rech HaKodesh, and in greed with fabricated words they shall use you for gain. From of old their judgment does not linger, and their destruction does not slumber. And then it's talking about that Elohim didn't even spare the angels. So of course he's not going to spare this bloodline of Jacob in their wickedness. He didn't even spare the angels. There's no partiality with Elohim. John 15:23 says, whoever hates me hates my Father also. They clearly hate him in the Talmud. So that means they hate Elohim. So why are we listening to teachings that clearly hate Elohim through their wickedness, and these people are held up and wearing things that the SoS are wearing? Those that say they are Yahudim and not but lie. I would say that the SoS are many, but now we're going to pick on those directly in the spirit of Judaism. See, Romans 11:28 says, as regards, we'll go there real quick. Romans 11:28 says, for I do not, 28, sorry. Truly as regards the good news, they are enemies for your sake, but concerning the choice, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. Okay, so yeah, but they are enemies regarding the gospel, and not to forget that. So talking about a bloodline and the spirit of rebellion, that's also what the Jezebel spirit is. I want to share with you another little teaser from Babylon the Great teaching. Matthew chapter 12, verses 43-45. You've seen this in a different way. Time to look at it in this way. This is the prophetic. This is the prophecy. If you don't know this is the prophecy, well, then you'll understand it now. So this is talking, and how you've been using it before, go ahead if that's how you feel led to use it before. But this is the prophetic understanding that you have not understood. Once you actually see it with eyes to see, there is no unseeing it. Now, when the unclean spirit goes out of a man, this is 70 AD. He goes through dry places, seeking rest and finds none. Then it says, I shall return to my house from which I came. This is in the 20th century, or maybe in the late 18th century, when people, that spirit decides to return. Not the bloodline itself, but that spirit, because that man died. The man died, but that unclean spirit, that spirit of Jezebel, that went out in 70 AD, that religious house, which later becomes Babylon the Great, it goes back to the house from which it came, and when it comes, it finds it empty, swept, and decorated. Then what is that? It is the unclean spirit goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself. How many heads did the harlot that she rides on? 7 heads. So 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last of the man is worse than the first. Now this is why it's a prophecy. So it shall also be with this wicked generation. He's saying that this wicked generation, what is this wicked generation? Before 70 AD is going to do what? That it is going to have it has an unclean spirit in it, and that in 70 AD it goes out of the man, and then through the next couple thousand years, that spirit of Judaism, of rebellion, of Babylon the Great is growing and manifesting, and in the end days it takes 7 other spirits more wicked than itself as the harlot sits there now, and brings that beast in there in its fullness, and the last of them man is worse than the first. Well, what is the last of that man? Well, the last of the man is us now today in the greater fulfillment of the destruction of Jerusalem, greater than 70 AD. We'll learn more about that in the Jerusalem teaching. But here, worse than the first. Well, what does that mean? So it shall be with this wicked generation. Where else do we see that? Well, none other than Matthew chapter 23. Of course, we've been there all episode. It says here, truly I say to you, all this shall come upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning those who are sent to her. See, your house is left to you desolate. And the last of that man is worse than the first. And when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that its desolation is near. That was 66 AD, and it came in the fullness in 70 AD, which is the shadow type and picture, as we're going to learn in Babylon the Great, that the last of that man is worse than the first, and that is a prophecy in Matthew chapter 12, verses 43 through 45, that this harlot Jezebel spirit, and that that this wicked generation, that the last of that man is worse than the first, but something is different. And the thing that is different that you need to understand, which is the final major point to share, as it says in Matthew 27:25, again, let his blood be on us and on our children. This two-tribe kingdom of bloodline Yahudim, those that were still under the covenant, they enacted the curses on them. And let's take a look at some of those curses that are there. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28. Blessing, 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 blessing. Until when? Until, and if you do not obey the voice. If you do not obey the voice to do all the commands which he command you today, not after Messiah, today, 3,500 years ago, then all these curses come upon you. We see curses, we see curses, we see curses. And so through the 2,000 years, we see the curses of this bloodline as they've been scattered, and that spirit is growing stronger, this unclean spirit through the remnant, because remember, the prophecy is that he's not going to make a complete end of all the bloodline, but it doesn't mean that he's going to save all the bloodline. Only a remnant shall be saved. And we see this continually in Scripture. But what do we see here? Very interesting, to verse 43 and 44. The sojourner who is among you. No, they're a sojourner. Why? Well, they're not of the one nation, so they don't get brought into his pure Torah. They get brought into what? They get brought into this corrupted Judaism understanding, this Babylonian system. The sojourner who is among you rises higher and higher above you, but you come down lower and lower. He lends to you, but you do not lend to them. He is the head and you are the tail. So that means that this sojourner, let's highlight this in green, and the sojourner does the, he lends, and the sojourner does the lend. We'll put it in green and wants that money. And he is the head, and we'll put that in green. So the sojourner is the lender and is the head. And that bloodline is lower and lower, so continues to get lower and lower. The downtrodden, those that are under curses, they don't have the money, they are the tail, they don't have the power. So what I'd like to ask, and this is a very legitimate question to ask, and as it says in verse 64, that they are now scattered among all peoples from one end of the earth of the other, and they're serving other Elohim, which they don't know, and they're among the nations, don't have a resting place. So the question that we need to ask, and let's go to the other blessings and curses chapter before we get there, in Leviticus chapter 26. And this is blessing, 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 blessing. It's the same thing. And then we have here the beginning of the curses. So I pass it up. But if you do not obey me and do not do all these commands, these are parallel chapters, and you go deeper and deeper, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And then what you have in verse 36. And as for those of you who are left from what? Well, left from getting killed off, but he's not going to allow a complete end of this bloodline. That's the promise. I shall send what? Faintness into the hearts. They shall flee. They shall stumble over one another. They shall be unable to stand before the enemies. They're going to perish among the nations, and the land of the enemy shall eat you up. So they are in their enemies' lands without money. They are the tails. They are broke. They are exiled, and they are under the curses. And a lot of them don't even know who they are because they're serving under other Elohim. And those of you who are left rot away in their crookedness in your enemy's lands, still in the enemy's lands, and also the father's crookedness with them. But then, as we covered, but if they confess what? The crookedness of their fathers and of their crookedness, which they personally did, and that of their fathers that they have. We have what? Then after they do this, and they are humbled and they accept punishment, then he remembers the covenant with the fathers and recovenant and also remembers the land. So what I'm going to ask is a simple question. It's a simple question that people should come to understand. If the two-tribe kingdom is broken off, those that are under those false spirits and those that are under the curses as they are accepted, let his blood be on us and on our children. And the only way through Leviticus 26:40 to come out from under that curse is to accept that what they have done and the sins of their fathers, and then they themselves can come back. Then what that means is that only through confession of what was done to Yahushua Mashiach, and what they've been doing in succession and have been doing, as we covered in Ezekiel 16 verses 46 through 53, that they made Sodom and 10-tribe kingdom Samaria righteous in comparison to the wickedness that they've been doing against the Father's covenant and transgressing against it. Even though they've stayed under marriage, they were broken off due to disbelief after rejecting the Messiah. Let his blood be on us and on our children, the Deuteronomy 18:18 prophecy. Therefore, I have to ask is this simple question: how can someone who doesn't have money, who therefore doesn't have power, and is the tail that denies Messiah Yahushua under a false house that is Antichrist system, by definition, Judaism, denying the Father, denying the Messiah, they don't have the Father or the Son. If they hate the Son, they hate the Father, and therefore are under the Antichrist spirit, how did they get control of what is called the Holy Land? How did they get all that money? How is it that group of people that say they are Yahudim but lie, how is it that they have the highest education and money and are the richest for a minority group, far exceeding those that are their affiliates and counterparts of all? They've surpassed all races with highest paid, most awards and Nobel prizes. How can you have that if they're still in a house denying Messiah? How do they get control of the Holy Land? When it says there'll be the tail and don't have the money, and the only way to get the covenant back and to get the land back is to accept the crookedness of their fathers, let his blood be on us and on our children, and their own crookedness that has led up into that. The only way is to accept and to reject this. And then who is it that has control of the Holy Land? Well, either the scriptures are a liar, or someone who's saying they are Yahudim and are not are a liar. Someone is a SoS, right? And we're getting on bloodline stuff. So I hope you understand that somewhere in the middle of that spirit, that false religious spirit, the sojourner, the non-bloodline got control, who's not under the curses, who became the head, who had the money, who got control over the land, and who falsely took control over these covenants, because Shiloh, after Shiloh came, the scepter was removed from this two-tribe kingdom, and the inscriber was removed, but somehow it transferred to someone who now claims they're Yahudim, but are not, and they in fact lie. Now, if you are of that bloodline that claims to be Yahudi, and I'm pointing at that, just understand that all those can come to the fullness of Messiah through the proper understanding, whether bloodline or grafted in. It doesn't matter. There's no partiality. But I want to share with this verse here, and then I'm going to share some photos, and we'll go ahead and close off. This is Colossians 3:11. Now check this out. I said I'd come back to this. I didn't forget. In Colossians 3:11, there is not Greek and Yehudi. So what are you talking about? He's talking about unbeliever and believer, right? It's not just talking about the Greek bloodline and the Yahudi bloodline. It's talking about there is he's saying that in Messiah, right? In Messiah, those putting off the old man practices, those that are in the renewed knowledge, in the likeness of who created him, that we are in Messiah is all and in all, the chosen ones of Elohim specifically, those that are chosen. And so if you are of that bloodline that claims to be Yahudim, but not, and clearly that bloodline cannot be Yahudim, because the scriptures say that the sojourner has the money, the power, and then the only way for the natural bloodline to get that money and power and land back is to relinquish that spirit of Judaism, which got them in trouble in the first place. And then they've doubled down on the Antichrist spirit and are still in that spirit and are actively working today as a core of Babylon the Great that are continuing in this movement. How can they have the land and the power and say that Elohim sent them back when it says that if you deny the Son or you hate the Son, you hate the Father and can't have the Father? That means that only Satan could have done that. That means that they had to be in league with Satan, and that the bloodline couldn't do it because they're under the curses. That means that the head, the sojourner, those with the money, that is in that spirit has taken control and has done a huge camouflage of the SoS, hidden in plain sight. So what does this mean here? The chosen ones of Elohim. What does it mean here in the Greek? In the Yahudi? Well, those who are chosen, who are Greek or Yahudi, doesn't matter. Those who are circumcised and uncircumcised of the flesh, because remember, it's that of the circumcision of the heart that matters, and it's the inside, not of the outside, that makes the Yahudi. So we covered these already. Now he says foreigner and Scythian. Now that's interesting. So he's doing contrast. Greek, he's doing Greek. So he's Greek as one, and then contrast Yehudi. And then he does circumcised contrast to uncircumcised. And then he also does another one, slave contrast to free. So he has contrast to contrast, Greek and Yahudi, believer and unbeliever, or not of the bloodline and of a bloodline, but it doesn't matter because those are the spirit, those one chosen to Elohim, who is a spirit, those of the spiritual adoption, circumcised and uncircumcised. So that is another contrast. And we have slave and free, which are another contrast. So we have polar opposites here. What about foreigner and Scythian? Now, they try to say here that Scythian is probably of foreign origin, that is by implication a savage, and that is rude or rough, or an inhabitant of where? Scythia, or a modern day Russia. And they were I don't have it up. I'm sorry. We have here in Colossians 3:11, not Greek and Yahudi, circumcised, uncircumcised, right? We have a slave free, Greek Yahudi, circumcised, uncircumcised, foreigner, and Scythian. Well, what is Scythian? What is foreigner? Well, if Greek and Yahudi are contrasted, if slave and free are contrasted, if circumcised and uncircumcised is contrasted, well, clearly Scythian and foreigner is contrasted. But what is Scythian here? Or barbarian is a foreigner, or a barbarian, as it says, one whose speech is rude and rough, strange language not understood. But then we also have Scythian, which is trying to say it's the same thing. foreign origin, which is a rude or rough. So they're trying to say it's the same thing. Now, I'm going to go to something that maybe you don't know. Let's take a look at this. Let me see if I can get this up on the map here. Do you see this here? This is the Huns Empire of Scythia. So you see here on the Empire of Scythia, this is right here. This is Crimea, and this is that peninsula, Crimean Peninsula, and then this is modern-day Ukraine, where that war is being fought at, which is the center of this kingdom of Scythia. Okay? Well, here's Scythia again. You can see here, this is also where the land of Gog and Magog comes from. This is where that Caucasus Mountains is right in here, are actually in this region here. And then here, in this area right here where it says Sarmatia, this is part of the Scythian kingdom. Wait. Yeah. No, that's correct. Part of the Scythian kingdom. This is where modern day Ukraine is where my cursor is here. Okay. So that's Scythia. In Scythia, we have where the Scythians are, right? We have Gomar and Tagarma and Ashkenaz, which is all in this area here. If anyone understands Ashkenaz, where that Ashkenazi. Now here is the Khazar Empire, which is right where old Scythia is. And if anyone has understood Khazaria, where they say that a lot of those of the Ashkenazi tribe come from, that here is Ukraine that is there. Well, that battle is being fought in Ukraine. And now, interestingly enough, as we can see the diaspora here of the Khazar Empire and going into certain regions and areas. This here where the Black Sea is, right here where my cursor is, this is Ukraine. Ukraine is part of their empire. Check this out. Here's the crest of Ukraine. Well, let me get rid of not that one. Do this one. Crest of Ukraine and the Khazarian Tamga. It's like the same crest. So I just wanted to share that understanding so that you see to yourself that as I see here what I believe, what could the SoS be talking about? Not Greek and Yahudi, because it doesn't matter, from unbeliever and believer, from circumcised, or I should say non-bloodline and bloodline, from those circumcised in the flesh and those uncircumcised in the flesh, or from those who are foreigners, even from the Scythian kingdom. These are polar opposites, from this barbarian and from the Scythian kingdom. Even the Scythians, and slave and free, it doesn't matter. Messiah is all in all as chosen ones of Elohim. Though I believe that this word Scythian is actually referring to the Khazarian kingdom, yes, I do. And I just wanted to share, that again, I maybe I'm incorrect, but can you show me how the two-tribe kingdom bloodline, which is under the curses, how they lose the money and they lose the lending ability and they become the tail and they are left to rot away in their enemies' lands, as Leviticus 36 through 39 state, and also as Deuteronomy states deeper on in the curses near the end of the chapter. How it can be that these people that are under the curses, that if they claim to be Yahudim of this bloodline today, these people today that are in control of that land, that set apart land today, and they got that land, how so? How do they get the money? How do they get the power? How do they get that land? Because they are still under that false religious house, that antichrist spirit. How can they get it? Well, that has to be Babylon the Great coming back in her fullness. And the sojourner has mixed from the natural born, in that the tail, which was once the tail, is now the head, and those that was a lendee is now the lender, and now that sojourner who is not under the curses but is still under that power and principality of that religious spirit has returned in Babylon the Great, as Matthew 12 verses 43 through 45 says, and the last of that man is worse than the first. It is a warning to people who claim to be under that bloodline because they think that they are safe by their blood, and highly likely, they're not even of that bloodline. They are at best the sojourner. And ultimately, they are connected onto a false religion that is directly under Antichrist spirit, the very same one that Messiah almost 2,000 years ago came to break the back of that false religious spirit and called all of his apostles out of it and was ardent against and openly call them vipers and den of serpents and blind guides and the father of the devil and lying and murdering, and that they're twofold likely. Their proselytes are twofold as likely of Gehenna as they are, and they shut up the heavens they shut up the heavens, but they don't go in, and they don't allow those to enter to go in. And so how can those people that are still under that same system and have gotten worse and worse and worse and worse, and the sojourner has switched with the natural born and now has gone back to that kingdom, and they think that Jerusalem is going to be protected because of their blood? And it's not even their, and the biggest deception of all is that they actually are goy, the very thing that they accuse everyone else of doing. Genesis 10:3 talks about Ashkenaz. Is that Ashkenazi? Is it not? It says in Genesis 9:27 that Elohim enlarged Japheth, which is what Ashkenazi is part of, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem. Right? So we see all these things. So if you are of this bloodline, I have nothing against you. We're all, Colossians chapter 3:11, Greek and, there's not Greek and Yahudi, circumcised, uncircumcised, foreigner, Khazarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Messiah is all in all. And therefore, as chosen ones of Elohim, that's what matters. But I do feel bad that Satan has deceived your tribe, your bloodline so badly. And I just understand. I want you to know that Yahudim and Yasharol, these terms ultimately are spiritual terms, but there is a bloodline connected to it. And so, but ultimately, it doesn't matter if you're of the bloodline or not, because if you are of Messiah, then you are adopted as sons, as a seed of Abraham. So there's not Yehudi or Greek, there's not slave or free. Not male or female, for you're all one in Messiah, Yahushua, Galatians 3:28. And if you are of Messiah, verse 29, then you are the seed of Abraham and heirs according to the promise. So the SoS that say they are Yahudim, but lie, it's bigger than bloodlines. But ultimately, the SoS are those who say they are those who thank, praise, and confess sin and confess the name of Yahuwah, the character of Yahuwah, but lie. However, that bloodline is a factor in today's day and age, and people are turning to it and flocking to it. Most importantly, they're flocking to the false religion that's over a 2,000-year-old deception, and they're following these ways. You do better to just study the Torah on your own and just let Moses speak and connect to the Ruach Kodesh through your faith in Messiah Yahushua, and you'll do a better job understanding the Torah than going through these houses, in my professional opinion, my professional amateur opinion. So those who say they lie are not. Who's the real Yahudim? Who are the false? Who's the bloodline? Who's the not? I think ultimately that Babylonian Talmudic Judaism religion is ultimately a major core in Babylon the Great, and that if those people that claim to be Yahudim in the blood are Yahudim in the blood, then they would nullify the scriptures if it were true. Because how can they get that power and money? How can the sojourner be in power and they don't have it, and they've not confessed and still holding on to that religion and somehow got the land? It doesn't make sense. Maybe someone can explain it to me. Maybe someone can explain. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I don't understand something. Can you please share with me? I want to do it in love. I'm trying to let you know it doesn't matter again about bloodlines. It matters about the spiritual understanding, and that's what's important. But I do believe that people use their bloodline to you're Yahudim by the blood. Oh, you were raised in Judaism. Oh, you must know all about the Torah, says someone who has no understanding, in my opinion. And it's, there's so much that I want to pick apart more, but I don't have any time to pick apart anymore in that understanding. So I thank you for sticking with me, and let's go ahead and let's get into our final section of Don't Cast Pearls Before Swine. So what we have here is a jar of pearls. You brothers and sisters are not swine. So I can cast a pearl, a nugget to help you. Let's go into some deep water today. 1 Corinthians 11:1. Become imitators of me as I also am of Messiah. And Messiah warned us about these pharisaical systems. He warned us about these false religious households. He warned us about these things. And we are to imitate him and to be bold when it needs to be bold and to be soft when it needs to be soft. And he is bold against lies of twisted interpretations. He was very bold against this religious system, and he called all of the apostles out of this religious system. So we are to be imitators of him as we are also of Messiah. We need to help each other out because way too many of our brothers and sisters are falling for this and are under this deception. This camouflage SoS hidden in plain sight, who say they are Yahudim and are not but lie, and it's ultimately all those that are false believers that are claiming to be in these false religious households. But beware of those that use their blood as clout to try to gain authority over you, because it is not about that. Salvation is of the Yahudim. John chapter 4:22. So we need to be imitators of Messiah and not of man. So remember to guard your heart, guard your soul, guard the Ra, or pay the toll.